So here we are, Parshas וישב. Parshas ויشv is known to be a very difficult parsha, the story of Yosef and his brothers. This is a famous story that's said over that one of the Maggid of Minsk, there was a machlekes, one of the big yeshivas in Europe many years ago, and the Maggid of Minsk, they asked him to get involved to try to make shalom or to pick a side, to whatever it was, and he got up and he said the following. He said, every parsha until Parshas Vayeshev, so Parshas Bereshis, it's Adam and the Nachash. Parshas Neach, it's Neach against the Dar Mabel. Lech Lecha, it's Avram against all the other people. Yitzchak and Yishmael, Yaakov and Esav. But now what? The teams over here is Yosef against his brothers. The Shvatim against Yosef. They're all Kadoshei Elyon. It's not Tzadik v'Rasha. It's Tzadikim Gemurim and Tzadikim Gemurim. So it takes on a whole new dynamic now, and it's difficult to understand what's the parsha, what's the machlekes, what's the asik over here. So Yeshiv Yaakov be'eretz Megurei Ovav be'eretz Canaan. There's a lot of ha'aros over here, but in Pshat, what's going on? So Yeshiv Yaakov dwelled be'eretz Megurei Ovav. Megurim is a lashon of dwelling. So why did the pasuk change the lashon from Vayeshev to Megurei Ovav? So Vayeshev Chazal darshan that whenever there's a lashon of yeshiva, trouble happens. And not because by English they make trouble, but whenever the pasuk has a lashon of yeshiva, it's a Gemara Sanhedrin on Daf Kuvov, and the Medrash over here says it in a few places, a few different midrashim. But that's a pshat that Megurei is. Mugur is the place where you live. Vayeshev means he settled. And we know that Chazal say that Bikesh Yaakov Leisha B'Shalva Kavet Alav Rugzei Shel Yosef. So tzaddikim, all they want to do is to serve Hashem with peace of mind, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't like that, right? And that's what Rashi brings this Chazal. Kavet Alav Rugzei Shel Yosef tzaddikim Mevakshim Leisha B'Shalva. Tzaddikim they want to sit peacefully. Tzaddikim know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that tzaddikim know that they're going to get a great chelik in the tremendous yishuv hadas. But they want to also have shalva b'el mazeh. They're not going to have shalva b'el mazeh, right? Tzaddikim, and it's fascinating because the Gemara at the end of the bracha says tzaddikim ein la menucha loy b'el mazeh v'lo elam haba. Even in elam haba, tzaddikim don't have menucha. So what's pshat? What's pshat that even in elam haba they don't have menucha? Right? So Pshat is like this. Pshat is that a tzaddik, he affected so many people in his lifetime. So all his talmidim and his children and the people that follow him in his ways, they're constantly, even when he's in Shemayim, they're constantly pushing him from madrega to madrega. And the Derech Hashem says, the Ramchal and Derech Hashem says a fascinating thing. And if you think about it, it's mamash amazing. He's talking about the Chet Avad Marishan and the period, the separation that happens between the neshama and the guf after a person leaves this world. Right? So we always understood, and we always understand that the ikar schar, the ikar tikkun, the ikar shleimus that a person has is when he gets Leil Mavo. He says no. The ikar shleimus is when the guf and the neshama get back together by Tchias HaMesa. So really, it's more Parshas Vayechi that Yaakov Avinu loy meis, but there's a concept over here that this is the parsha of Golus Mitzrayim. This is where Golus Mitzrayim is starting. Yosef Hurad Mitzrayim was this week, and this is going to take us into Golus Mitzrayim, and this is going to bring about the Yaakov Avinu Lemeis. Yaakov Avinu dies in Mitzrayim, right? Avram was nifter in Eretz Yisrael. Yitzchak never left Eretz Yisrael. Yaakov, there's three people. There's three people. Yaakov was nifter in Mitzrayim, and he was buried in Eretz Yisrael, right? The end of Parshas Vayechi, they went and they brought him to bury him in Mars HaMachpelah. Esav came, they chopped off Esav, they whacked off Esav's head. Either it was Chushim Ben Dan or Yehuda, different Chilukei Deis and Chazal, and they buried Yaakov there. Yosef was buried in Mitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu took out the Aron of Atzmas Yosef and brought that to get buried in Eretz Yisrael. And Moshe himself never even made it into Eretz Yisrael, and he's not even buried in Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara Saita has a whole story over there about Moshe Rabbeinu, where the makam of Kvurasei Shel Moshe is. Moshe Rabbeinu never, one man the Gemara says that Moshe Rabbeinu never died. It's a complex chazal to understand what that whole business means. But Al Gapanim, that's between the story of Tchias HaMesim over here. Another important nakud over here, Rashi is marach over here, that the reason why we're talking about the Toldos of Yaakov, as the pasuk continues of Ela Toldos Yaakov Yosef and Shras Rishona, that the pasuk goes into discussing the descendants and the offspring of Yaakov Avinu, and that is Be'ikr Yosef, which we'll get to in a second, is because till this point, at the end of Parshas Vayishlach, Achar Shekasav Lachishuvei Esav and Toldos Derech Tzara, the Torah went through all the Alufei Esav, all the descendants of Esav, and all the kings that come out of Esav, right? And now we're going to get back into the Toldos. We're going to get focused. The Torah is going to refocus us on the Tzara Kedusha and tell us about the Yeshuvim and tell us about the situations of the Tzara Kedusha of Yaakov and his descendants going down to Mitzrayim. And Rashi's marach over here, but the point is like this. The point is that the pasuk says, the pasuk in Avadia says, "V'haya beis Yaakov Eshu beis Yosef lahava beis Esav lakash." This is the creation of that. This is the creation of it. This is what's happening. Nitzutz yotzei me Yosef shemechala v'saref es kulam. There's a spark that comes out of Yosef and destroys everything, and destroys Esav. The destruction of Esav comes dafka through the hands of the children of Rachel. That means Yosef and Binyamin. Binyamin, we know, never bowed down to Esav. He's b'chlal not meshubah to him. Once the Shvatim bowed down to Esav, they were machni a little bit to the Tzara, they were machni a little bit to them. It was, they were machni a little bit to the Tzara, but Binyamin never did that. Binyamin was born later, he missed that whole story, he missed that whole event. But it's either B'yadei Shal Yosef or B'yadei Shal Binyamin that Esav is going to have his downfall ultimately. And what's interesting is, because Mordechai HaTzadik, in the story of Purim, he dafka comes from Shevet Binyamin, and there's a lot of Torah on that he, dafka Shevet Binyamin, he's fighting with Haman, he's knocking out Zara Shalom Malek. Okay. Fine. Weiter. So Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz Beguri Aviv Zok Ba'al Turim Begematria Yoshav L'Kai Mitzvos Kibud Omar B'Schar HaKibud Zoche Esav L'Chol HaKavod Hazeh. So where does it come from? Where does it come from that Esav should have all these kings and all these descendants that descended from him? Because he was Makbid and Kibud Av, like we spoke. Like the Gemara says, or Gamliel said, that Halavai we should get to a Chelak, a Mashahu of the Mitzvahs Kibud Av of what Esav was, what Esav did. Now just think about it for a split second. Kabed es avicha, right? Kabed es avicha ve'asimecha, right? The father comes first. And ish imay v'aviv tiro, right? It says the mother first, right? By Yira, it says the mother first, and by Kibud, it says the father first. The person is much faster to honor his mother than to his father. The person is much more afraid of his father than his mother. That's why the Torah has it written this way. So we have to understand that Yitzchak is the midah of Gvura. So his child, who is Esav, is the Spitz Midah of Gvura. He's the perversion of the Gvura. I mean, he's the Tumah de Gvura, because he lives a life of Al Charba Chatichya. He lives a life of complete Hefkerus, which is a fascinating thing, because, why is he Mevaza the Bechayr? Because he said, there's no point in me being alive. So he has used from the very beginning. Once a person doesn't see a point in his life, a person's miyayish very quickly, he'll do anything because he doesn't see a point. He doesn't have any hope of getting out of the mess. So that was where he was stuck, because of the Gevura created, the Midas Hadin that he was living with created that sense a little bit. So that's why he ended up killing and doing all kinds of Vilda Averis, right? So we mentioned this once before, and we'll say it again because it's this week's parsha, that Avram is the Midah of Chesed. He's discovered everything. Yitzchak is the Midas Hagvura. He's the first one that was born as a Yid, and he was gemalt on the 8th day. Yaakov is the Erste Fafalner. He's the one that's the default of a Yid, and his job is to take these two Midas of Chesed LaAvram and the Pachad Yitzchak and combine them together to create the Midah of Tiferes, which is Titein Emes Liyaakov, which is Torah, which is Kedusha. Now comes Yosef. Now we start with the parsha of Yosef. The job of Yosef is the insurance policy to protect against the falling out of anywhere of Yaakov Avinu. Now, it's important to know like this, because Avram had Yishmael, Yitzchak had Esav, Yaakov is Mitasei Shlema. There's no Psul Bezaroi. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The Gemara Pesachim says, Shema Yisrael, the Shvatim were talking to Yaakov Avinu. The Rambam says this is the kavanah when we're saying Shema. Shema Yisrael. It doesn't mean hear, O Israel. They were talking to Yisrael Saba, the old man Yaakov that was lying in front of them. Yisrael, his name was Yisrael. He was talking to them. He says, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, because Yaakov wanted to be Megal of the Kates to them. He wanted to tell them when Mashiach is coming, and the Shechina was nostalgic from him. The Shechina left him. So he says, Shem Yesh Psul Bazari, maybe I have a Psul in my Zar, because he knew that he knew Baruch HaKodesh, that if he was going to have a Psul Bazari, then he wasn't going to be able to have Ashras HaShechina. He needed to have, he was always, Vayira, the whole Parshas Vayishlach, Yaakov is so afraid. What is he so afraid of? He's afraid that there's going to be a Pagam in his children. He's afraid that he's going to lose one of his children. He's afraid that someone's going to do an Avera Chas V'Shalom. What's he so afraid of? The Midah of Yaakov is not Yira, right? The Midah is Tiferes. The Midah is Kedusha, right? But what's the insurance policy on the Kedusha? The fact that Yosef, as a 17-year-old boy, is able to stand up in such an aside. That ensures that Klal Yisrael can protect themselves against Yetzer Hara. That's where it's at. That's the tafkid of Yosef. And that's the midah of Yosef. And once a person, Shtein Chazal, that a person who protects himself from looking at things they shouldn't look at and from doing Averis in this area, if he doesn't do that and he's misgaber on his Yetzer, so at that moment that he's misgaber on his Yetzer, he has a koyach to be mevakesh whatever he wants. So think about it like this. The pasuk says, L'cha Hashem ha'gdula v'ha'gvura v'atiferet. Gdula is Avram. Gvura is Yitzchak, Tiferes is Yaakov, HaNetzach. It's out of order a little bit in this sense, but Kichol Bashamayim V'Oretz is the midah of Kineged Yosef. Yosef is the sixth midah. It's called Yesod. It's called Kichol Bashamayim V'Oretz. It's the connection between Shemayim and Oretz. I mean, our job, our tafkid is to be that bridge between Shemayim and Oretz, but the Nakuda is that when a person is Shemer Atzmai from an Aveira, so then he creates a olam pnimi within himself. He creates a world within himself that now he could ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu wherever he wants, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you know what? Now he deserves it. Yeah? The Medrash says at the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, the Medrash says Kedoshim to you that you should be Parish Min Arayas. The Yachol Kamaini, you think that it should be Kaddish like a Kaddish Baruch Hu, right? Or like the Malachei Ashares. So it's a big shmuz in this form, but Chalal is Klal Yisrael higher than Malachei Ashares, lower than Malachei Ashares. It's a big shmuz, right? But the Nakuda is that on the tzad that a person is living his life like a normal person, right? And, he's involved in mundane activities. So a Malach obviously is Kaddish. A Malach has inherent Kedusha because he's created by Kadosh Baruch Hu and he's living in a much higher olam and a much higher sphere than us. But we who have a chelik l'kam mal and we have a neshama within us, which a neshama may even be higher than Malach, we're not here to discuss that, but the point is that a person who's shaymer atzma, a person who's guarding himself and protecting himself and is trying his hardest not to be nichshel in certain things, when he's misgaber and when he's not nichshel in these things, that's when he gets elevated to the madregas higher than Malachei Ashares, and Malachei Ashares are afraid of him. And that's what it means, Kichol Bashamayim V'Oretz. Anything that exists within this world is now, he conquered all that. So he's above all that. If he could control that Yetzer Hara, if he could be on top of that Yetzer Hara, then it's Kichol Bashamayim V'Oretz. He's good. You can't rely on yourself that, I wasn't Nichshel last time, this time it never works like that. Because Yitzhak Shaladam is Gabra Mischadish Lamavakish Lamisai. Right? The way the Yetzer Hara works is that he doesn't stop. And you gotta, Melech Zaken Uksil, you gotta keep on fighting with him. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop until after 120. Okay, so Eila told us Yaakov, Yosef ben Shras Rishona, Yosef was 17 years old. And he's taking care of the sheep with his brothers. It's interesting, the dikduk kapasuk is Hayaraya as Echov Batzain. He was showing his brothers how to shepherd the sheep. Is that what it means? Maybe. Right? Or it means that he was doing it together with his brothers. Why is Yosef singled out? I mean, Bechlal Yosef is going to be singled out from amongst the Shvatim. Here, in the pashtus of the story, the way we were taught, and as little children, if we learn Parshat Yeshiv as kids, but the way we're taught is that Yosef was like a little bit outcasted by the brothers. He wasn't so accepted, right? which only made the Nisayon even greater. Because what happens is that even if a person is very stark protecting himself from Yetzer Hara, right, when he's put into a difficult situation, like, I can't do this anymore. Yosef is 17 years old. He didn't get along with his brothers. His father tried to be nice to him in a certain sense. His brothers sold him for a pair of shoes. He gets thrown in a pit with snakes and scorpions. He gets sold to these nasty people in Mitzrayim, these Yishmaelim, these Midyanim. He ends up by Sarat HaBachim Lebeis Paro. It's all kinds of schmutz there. It's all kinds of kishuf, all kinds of avodah zarah, all kinds of arayas there, all kinds of horrible things going on over there. And he's Emet Ben Yisrael. It's mind-boggling, right? But in a certain ifin, in the way our world is today,
in the same area,
we're not that far off, right? The nakuda is the mahalach has to be that we have to we have to build within ourselves a very important sense of mission and a sense of reality, and how do we focus on kedusha, right? So Yaakov is a symbol of kedusha, right? But what is that? What's kaddish in our world that we can relate to, that we could put into our lives? That's Torah. And the Gemara says, "Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin." I created Yetzer Hara, I created Torah Tavlin. The Gemara tells us a fascinating story that the Chazal tried very hard to be mevatel Yetzer Hara v'avodah zarah. The story goes that one of the Amoraim was giving shir, and he was talking about Menashe. Menashe was the king in the times of, he was son of Chizkiah Melech. He was one of the Malachim. He did all kinds of terrible averos. Mamish on the worst. He ended up doing tshuva, a whole situation, a whole story. Anyway, so this Amor was giving shir to his Talmidim, and he said, our friend Menashe, he was talking about Menashe, he said, our friend Menashe. That night, Menashe comes to this Amor in a dream, and he tells him, he says, listen, where do you cut, he asked him a shayla halacha, he didn't know. So he says, you're calling me your friend, you don't even know basic shayla, and basic shayla, and Hilchas and Shulchan Aruch, like, you don't know basic shayla. So he says, Chashtenish. Once you hear, let me ask a question. He said, Chashtenish. He said, what's pshat that you were so involved in avodah zarah? Like, how could it be? You're a smart person. You're not stupid. You're not foolish, right? So he said, trust me. If you would be living at that time, you would pick up your robe, you would pick up your jacket, and you would run. You would run to avodah zarah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had it in Azar Oifen that's what the avodah zarah had real power, and it had a power for people were very driven to it, right? Now, arayos, we understand that people have a drive for that. That's an inherent human kind of drive, right? But we have to be misgaber over that. Now, the Yitzhak Avodah Zarah, we can't really fathom what that is. But when the Anshe Knesset Hagdela wanted to be mevatel, the Yitzhak Arayos, they got into, it didn't exactly work out. Why? Because the world revolves around us. What do I mean that the world revolves around us, right? The Gemara said that they needed a chicken egg for somebody who, because they needed a chicken egg for a chayla, for a sick person. So they couldn't find it, right? The whole world works in a dynamic of Zachar and Nekeva Mashpia Makabel. So the concept of Zachar and Nekeva, right? The whole world revolves around that. So if you're going to stop Arayas, you're going to stop the Yetzer Hara of Arayas, the world is not going to be able to exist. We're not going to have further dairis, right? And the Gemara says, Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin. So all the Mefarshim speak out that Barasi Torah Tavlin, Tavlin means a spice. Now, when you make a cholent, when you make a soup, you want to make sure it's perfectly spiced. So why are we comparing a Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Torah Tavlin? You should say the Barasi Torah to knock out the Yetzer Hara. But the pshat is that that's not what it means. It doesn't mean to knock it out. You need the Yetzer Hara to be able to give you that drive. If you could channel that drive and to turn it into something of Kedusha, to turn it into Torah, to turn it into a passion for Limud Torah, you're gonna create tremendous ilamas. You're gonna create tremendous Kedusha in the world by attaching to that. Now, I'll tell you something fascinating. I don't remember if I mentioned it to you or not. We know the first mitzvah in the Torah is Peru Revu. The last mitzvah in the Torah is Ve'ata Kisu Lechem Es Ashira, as I was writing down the Sefer Torah. I believe it's in the Megala Amukas. he says that the same way, I mean, the concept is not from the Megalim, because he just tells it to this Indian of the first mitzvah and last mitzvah in the Torah, that the concept of the same way there's a concept of Pru or Revu b'min hagashmi, meaning that male and female get together and have children. The same way it works b'min haruchni, to create chedushay Torah. When a person connects himself to the Torah, so then he can create, by him being mashpia onto the Torah being mashpia onto him, however you're going to look at it, like that, to be moiled, to create offspring, that's called chedushay Torah. Now, this is a massive thing. Why am I saying this? Because the Gemara says, the Ein Ben David Bar Sheichel Kol Neshama Shabaguf. Says Mashiach can't come unless, Rashi explains that Guf is a chelik of something in Shemaim that's next to the Kisei HaKavod, where all the neshamas exist. And Mashiach can't come, Ben David can't come until all those neshamas have come down into this world. The same is true with Chedushay Torah. That there has to be, meaning the same way it is very specific when a certain child is born, same way it's very specific when a certain Chidush in Torah is going to be said. Right? The Gemara says in Psachim, the Gemara is talking about that a person should talk B'lashon Nikiya and shouldn't talk B'lashon Maguna. So the Gemara says that Muftachani Bazeh Shemar Rabbi Yisrael. The one of the Talmidim spoke on a certain offense, I think it was Rabbi Yechon, and said that Muftachani Bazeh, he gave him a brach, he gave him a maftacha that he's going to be a Ma'ir Rabbi Yisrael, he's going to pass on Shilas for the Yidden. Effective Ben Ishchai, effective Ben Yoda, he sat on a stand. He said, you're going to be a Ma'ir Rabbi Yisrael. When was the last time you had a good guy that became a Ma'ir Hara for the Goyim? Obviously he's going to be a Ma'ir Rabbi Yisrael. Right? So he says that the pshat is that there are some people that their Torah and their Torah become very, very well known throughout the world. And then there are those people that their Torah is not well known. They can sit in a little corner and they, I say this all the time, everyone heard of Chaim Kanievsky, but not everyone heard of Reb Zundel Kreuzer. Reb Zundel Kreuzer, Reb Chaim said in him that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's machshav is Torah even more than his, because the Haraya, people bother Reb Chaim all day, they don't let him learn, and nobody bothers Reb Zundel because no one ever heard of him. It was tremendous. Going who called her Kula, and they say that he had all kinds of, person was telling me that he had all kinds of mifsim, all kinds of murdic stories that were going on by him. Really, really not, a very heilige person, right? So, again, we see that there's a very specific siyata d'shmaya with people and their hashpah and their kayach haTorah in the world. So it's like this: so once we have it that in order to get to a certain shleimus in the world, we need to create a certain amount of chedushay Torah, right? Ein Ben David Ba, right? And there's a pasuk in Kehelis. I forgot exactly the nusach of the pasuk, but basically it says, "Bini asay svarim harbe ein kates." Make a lot of svarim. What are you making a lot of svarim for? What's the point, right? But kafi this, we're being made kind of the mitzvah of Puravu also, right? And here's where it gets really interesting. Ben Azai, the Gemara says, Ben Azai said he didn't want to get married because nafshi chashka b'Torah. What does that mean? He desires Torah. Okay. So why is that a p'tur? I don't want to daven, I don't want to shake lulav because nafshi chashka b'Torah. Pshat is no. Pshat is because he knew that he was going to create offspring in the min haruchni by creating chedushay Torah. And Moshe, in Igros Moshe Chelak Tes, in the one that came out not so long ago, so Moshe says, Chizkiah HaMelech Yeshaya Hanavi came to him and tells him, listen, you're going to die. So he says, well, he says, because you're not married. So why didn't he use the same B'tur as Ben Azai? We see it's clear that there was nobody that had Azach Yeshua Katar like Chizkiah HaMelech, and the Gemara says that, right? But there was something specific that he needed to do to bring out the two children that he had. Menashe and Rav Shakeh died young, and Menashe was king for 50 years. We just mentioned them before, right? But so when we say Barasi Yitzhahar, Barasi Torah Talmud, we need to there's a certain Cheshek HaTorah that a person has to have in order to create in Torah. Torah is not to be a nice book on the shelf. Torah is here that you can create Olamus. Torah is here that you can create Chedushim. Now, so don't get scared, because people will say, well, who am I? I could be Mechadesh anything, right? So I'll tell you two things. Reb Chaim Volozhin writes that Chedushay Torah does not mean you came up with a whole new mahalach in the sugya. It means you went through the sugya and you have a perfect clarity that this is what the Gemara is saying. The Chiddush means that it's clear. Reb Chaim Schwartz, a Rebbe from Yeshiva, so when he was young, I think he was a younger man, or a bacher even, the Yeshiva called him in, and the Yeshiva told him to write out his learning, what he's thinking and learning. And he should bring it to him every week or every month. I forgot exactly what it was. 25 years later, the Yeshiva gave him an envelope, a manila envelope that had all these Torahs that he wrote over the years that he wrote to him. And he said it was unbelievable, because not just all the Torah that accumulated over the years, but he said the Yeshiva pushed him in such a way that he was actually able to bring out Tago was able to bring out new things. Does it mean that no one else in the world ever said it? Lav dafka, right? But at least for him, he knew that he had a certain clarity in the sugya. I want to say something else. Once a person, just like a person brings a child into the world, it's a whole new olam, the whole new thing. By Chiddushei Torah, it's the exact same thing. There's a story that the Yosef, the Baal HaShulchan Aruch, Maran HaMechaber, right? So he had a shvarket learning, and for 3 days he was working on it, trying to figure it out. And after 3 days, he figured it out. And then, I don't know if it was that day or the next day, whatever it was, a short time later, he has 2 kids learning. One of them asked the other one a kasha, the other one just burps out the tarots. He's like, chutzpah. Ich bin Beis Yosef. I'm going to go to Ladar. I know everything. I know Kol Torah Kula. How could it be? This 15-year-old bacher, this 10th grader, he sits down with the kasha, his chavrusa burps out the tarots like that? He had Chilul Shadas, like how could that be? But he explained, I don't know if he explained, but the explanation is, at least, that once it's brought down into the world, it's accessible for everyone else, right? So, I'm going to say this, it may sound nuts, right? But I believe this to an extent, that many times we could be learning something, and to us, we think we have a mahalach in something. We know that there may be Rishonim or there may be Achreinim that don't say like we're saying, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that we're completely off the track. If our cheshbon follows correctly, right, and we know that we're coming from the Gemara, Rashi, whatever it is, it's very shaykh that we're creating a new chiddush now. That now is the time for this chiddush to be in this gal. I have to chab something. What's left for us after there's so many great Talmidei Chacham over the last even 200 years, what Torah is left for us to say? Isn't all the Torah already said? Obviously not. I mean, we know that. The people that are putting out a lot of Torah now, right? Not saying that every single sefer that's coming out now from every single young man in the world is going to be completely new, but there are. Sometimes you look at a sefer like, oh, this guy has something to offer, right? That's this koyach of being moiled, of creating a new chiddush, right? So that's taking the kedushas haTorah to protect ourselves from the Yetzer Hara and using it to use it to the exact opposite effect of what the Yetzer Hara wanted from us. But that's why Torah is a tavlin, Torah is a spice, because it's so much better now. I spiced it up. I made it better. I made it more geschmack. I made a chiddush. I created something. I created an oilam. Right now, the greatest part of this whole shtickle Torah is like this, because it says. There's a pasuk in Yeshaya. That says the following. The pasuk says that probably in the back of the Chumash, on the Haftarah for Machar Chodesh, I believe it is, that says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to make Shemayim HaChadosh and Ve'eretz HaChadosha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to create a new world. L'asad Lavai, L'elam Haba. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to create a new world. Shtein Chazal, you know what that new world is going to be made out of? These Chidushei Torah that we created. And the goal is that when we're creating these new neshamas, when we're bringing down these new neshamas and these new Chidushei Torah, neshamas, I mean this new Chidushei Torah, that right now is creating the Shemayim HaChadashim and the Eretz HaChadashah. We don't have to wait. Meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to take all the Chidushei Torah from all the years and create an entire Shemayim HaChadashim and the Eretz HaChadashah for everyone. But when we create a Chiddush in Torah, that for us is our Shemayim HaChadashim and Eretz HaChadashah. So that's taking the Yetzer Hara and channeling it into something else. The pasuk in Tehillim says, "Kim b'seiras Hashem cheftzai, u'b'seirasa yegayem avalayla." Right? If you're going to be Isaac in Teres Hashem, if your chayfetz is going to be in Teres Hashem, right? U'b'seirasa, and then in your Torah yegayem avalayla, you should be Isaac yem avalayla. It changed. First it was Teres Hashem, and then it was your Torah, right? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the koyach to learn Torah, not just to learn Torah, but to create Torah, and to build Torah, and to create new mahalchim in Torah, and to create new ilmus with Torah, right? Like we said all the time, how could it be? What's this whole business of Tzaddik goes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mekayim? When the Tzaddik davens, so he creates a new world, when that world, whatever Gzera it was, doesn't exist. When it comes to Chedushei Torah, it's even stronger, because Torah, in a sense, is stronger than Tefillah, right? It's Tefillah is called Chayei Shah, and Torah is called Chayei Olam. And when a person creates Chedushei Torah, he creates a new elements. Nishna Dem, not only that, but if we pass in a certain way, right, the Teva has to bend to the Torah, not the Torah bending to the Teva, right? There's Yerushalmi Ksubis. Bavus the Yerushalmi Ksubis, everyone mentions it by Chanukah. The Yerushalmi Ksubis says that if a girl, if with the basulim of a girl before she's 3 years old got removed, so then before 3 it's going to come back. What if it's an Ibiyar, right? Because then it says if the Chachamim make an Ibiyar, the basulim also going to come. Basulei Chayzos. What do you mean? Because when Chazal make an Ibiyar, Chazal add an extra month, the Teva bends the Chazal. You can say science doesn't agree. I know. Science never agrees. We don't agree with Abi Carson. True, 100%. Right? But in a Gevitza B'china, basics, that the Torah has to bend, that the Teva has to bend to the Torah. And it's not pshat that the Teva has to bend to the Torah. Pshat is that when we create an olam of Torah, when we create a Shemayim HaChadashim, that is the Metzias. The Metzias is Torah. The Metzias is Kedusha. The Metzias is Kedusha. Right? We should be Zeichev b'mehera, to see, to create, and to see, and to be nene from our own Shemayim HaChadashim and Eretz HaChadashah. Meher v'meinu Amen.